We're going to begin in the book of Galatians in chapter 4. Galatians chapter 4, I'm going to begin at verse 1. Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, differeth nothing from a servant, though he be Lord of all, but is under tutors and governors until the time appointed of the Father. Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because ye are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore, thou art no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. I want to stop reading right there, make a few points, and then we're going to move on. I want to tell you that every one of us who is ever born in this world, were born, as it says here, in this manner. It says that when we were children, we were in bondage under the elements of the world. But there came a time when God sent forth his Son to redeem those that were under the elements of the world. I'm not going to go deep into that. I want to get to a certain point. But because of Christ, because of his death, burial, and resurrection, we have been redeemed. And it says here that in verse 5 that we were redeemed that we might receive the adoption of sons. That's daughters also. That's male and female. That's not just referring to men. But it says that we receive the adoption. And because we are sons, or because we are daughters, because we are children of God, God has sent forth his Spirit into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Abba, Father is a term of endearment, but basically what I want you to get here is that when you are born again, God is your Father. He is your loving, your kind, your patient, your caring Father. That's who he is. And then he goes on, he says, Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. Once you are born again, you become a child of God. God becomes your Father. And because God becomes your Father, you become an heir of God and of Christ. Now, what is an heir? An heir, according to the original language, the word that was used, an heir is a sharer of the possessions. That's what an heir is. An heir is a sharer of the possession. So when you were born again, you became an heir of God. You became an heir of Jesus Christ. You became a sharer of the possessions of God. You became a sharer of the possession of Jesus Christ. I'm going to jump over to the book of Romans, chapter 8, and break in at verse 14. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. That's what I was talking about in the previous scripture. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. Jump over to verse 31. What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? I wanted to read this again so I could add that in there, that part of the scripture. Now remember, if you're born again, you are a child of God. If you are a child of God, then you are a son, you are a daughter, then you are an heir. You are a sharer in the possessions of God and of Christ. And what did it say here? How would he who gave up his Son not freely give us all things? The things of God are mine. I am an heir of God. The things of God are mine. If you are born again, you are a child of God. You are an heir of God, and those things belong to you. And the scripture right here tells you that he will freely give you all things. And let me ask you this question. Are you experiencing all the things of God? If we are not, why are we not experiencing the things of God that we desire to experience? We want those things, do we not? We want the moving of the Spirit in our lives. We want to feel the power of the Spirit. We want to be used by God. We want that joy unspeakable and full of glory. We want peace in any circumstance, any situation. Even when the storms are rolling and the seas are rough, we want to be calm. We want to be at peace. We want to have all that happiness. We want all of those things. We want that confidence. We want that faith. Everything that belongs to God, we want those things, do we not? Why don't we have them? The Bible clearly tells us, and I can take you many more places, that we are heirs. If we are children of God, we are heirs of God. And what is an heir? I gave you the definition. It's a sharer of the possessions. I get to share in the things of God. If they are mine, why am I not sharing in them? Why am I not experiencing them? Why am I not having them? They're mine. I want them. So why is it that I do not have them? That's what I want to talk about a little bit here this morning. But remember these scriptures. Keep this in your mind and in your heart. You are an heir. I showed you in the Word, you are an heir. If you are born again, child of God, you are an heir of God. An heir is a sharer in the possessions. And the scripture here tells us that if God spared not his own son, but he delivered him up for us, how will he not freely with him give us all things? That's a rhetorical question. What he's saying is, if he was willing to give up his son to redeem us, then he will give us all things. That's what he's saying. I want to jump over to the book of Luke in chapter 15. And I'm going to break into verse 11. I'm not going to read all this. It's lengthy. You know this. I'm going to kind of walk us through until I get to the place that I want to focus on. Luke chapter 15, beginning at verse 11. A certain man had two sons. You know this, the parable of the prodigal son. Okay, what happens in this parable? There's two sons. There is this man, and his younger son comes to him and says, Father, I want you to give me the things that belong to me. I want you to give me my portion. And so the father gave him his portion. Now listen though, if you look at verse 12, I want you to get this. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that fall to me. And he divided unto them his living. He gave both of them. He divided unto them. He split it between the two of them. So then the younger son, he takes it, he goes out, he wastes all his money on riotous living. He ends up down in the hog pen. We all know the account. At some point he came to himself and he said, the servants back in my father's house have more than I do. Here I am eating with pigs. I'm going to go back to my father and ask for forgiveness. We know the account of that, so he goes back. His father welcomes him, gives him the ring, the robe. They throw a party because he has come home. And I want to get to this point. Go to verse 25. This is after the son came back and they're throwing the party for him, killed the fatted calf. Verse 25 says, Now his elder son was in the field, and he came and drew nigh to the house. He heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Okay, a couple things I want to look at here. Just real quickly, I want to take a look at the younger son. He took what the father gave him, and he went out and he wasted it. And ended up in the hog pen, but I'm going to tell you something. If you are a child of God and you're out there living the way that you ought not to live, then you ain't got none of the things of God. In this parable, what we learned was everything that he did have from his father was wasted. He threw it away. If you walk away from God, or if you are out there living in an ungodly manner, if you're living in ways that you ought not to be living, doing things that you ought not to be doing, don't expect to receive your portion of the inheritance, because you have thrown it away and you ain't going to receive it. In this parable, what he says about the younger son, when he was gone, he was dead. When he come back, he said, my son was dead. And so dead people don't get an inheritance. Dead people can't use an inheritance. Dead people can't do anything with an inheritance. So I want to submit to you that if your life is miserable and you're not experiencing the joy of the Lord and you're not partaking of the good things of God, maybe it's because you have gone out there and doing things with it that you ought not to do. You have thrown it away. You have given it up. You have walked away from it. You don't have to go to the extreme that this one went to. But if you are living an ungodly life, don't expect God to be giving you anything. Don't expect God to be doing anything for you. Oh, Brad, why are you preaching like that? We're all good people. I'm preaching like this because this is the message that God has given me. I do not know your heart. God knows your heart, and you know your heart. And if you're not experiencing the fullness of God, then maybe that's why.
That's right. Amen.
Now let's look at the older one. He didn't take his stuff and go out and waste it. He stayed there and he worked, and he worked, and he worked, and he was there with the father. And when the other one come back, and there's a party, and the fatted calf is killed, and everything is going on there, and the older son comes in and he said, look, you gave all this stuff to him. I've been here the whole time. I've been working. I've been doing this and I've been doing that. And you ain't give me one thing. I want you to remember back to the beginning of that. It says he got his. Mm-hmm. Didn't it say? He divided it among them. But not even thinking about that. When he come and he said that to the father, what did the father say? You're all here with me all the time. Everything that I have is yours. So why wasn't he enjoying it? Why wasn't he doing something with it? Because he didn't get it. He didn't pick it up and use it. He didn't do with it what he could have done with it. It was already his. In the beginning of the parable, he divided it among them. And then here at the end of the parable, he tells them, son, you are ever with me. And everything that I have is yours. If it's mine, what can I do with it? Whatever I want.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. He could have too. He could have enjoyed it. He just did not.
Right.
A couple things I want to say about that before I move on. Sometimes you can get so caught up in everything else that you don't take the time to enjoy what God has given you. Amen. You can get caught up in the day-to-day hustle and bustle. You can get caught up in church work. You can get caught up in so much stuff that you don't take time to enjoy the things that God has provided for you. And I think that happens to a lot of us. If you're not experiencing the good things of God, if you're not enjoying the good things of God, if you don't have those things that God said that we could have, maybe that's why. You're too focused on everything else. You're looking at your life. You're looking at the world. You're looking at this. You're looking at that. You might even, like I said, get caught up in church work and miss out on the things that God has for you. They're yours. God said they were. Just like in this parable. Just like I started out. If